Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking the initiative to join us on this call. And if you're watching this recording at a later date, welcome from the past. We're excited to have you. Excited that you saw the importance of the topic that we're talking about today. It was marketed as Restless Nights, Restless Minds. There we go. But we're kind of breaking it down into a couple of different conversations here all around the topic of ADHD. And so we're really excited to just kind of shed some more light on ADHD as a whole as a topic, as it is a very prevalent topic and conversation in our culture and in our kind of ethos as a society. We want to kind of maybe try and give the truth and try and sweep away some misinformation, as well as maybe shedding some light on some new things as well. So my name is Tyler Robbert. I have the privilege of being an educator at MyoWay Centers for Kids. We're a myofunctional therapy center focused on healthy jaw and airway development in children. And I'm being joined today by a friend and partner in crime in this way, Alexandra Dimoff. She's a licensed professional counselor that we kind of partnered with over the last few months. She's just a wonderful asset, a huge source of great information. So I'm really excited to hear what she's going to be sharing with us on the front end of this conversation, and then midway through we'll kind of transition and I'll share a little bit of insight from our side of things. So without further ado, Alexandra, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Alexandra Dimoff. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have been in the mental health field for 9 years and am currently in my own private practice in downtown Mars, where I see clients in person and virtually. So I'm excited to spread more awareness for ADHD and talk about some of my own case examples. And just more about me. Again, I've been in the mental health field for 9 years. Prior to being in my practice, I worked in community mental health, where I would treat children in their home, school, and community settings. So much of what I did was helping the family and the school communicate to get the best treatment for the child. And one of the diagnoses that I treat and diagnose is ADHD. So I'm going to start by giving the clinical definition of ADHD. So according to the DSM-5, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by persistent patterns of inattention and hyperactivity. Symptoms need to occur for at least 6 months across all settings. So that would be at home, in school, and in the community. It's not just a sugar rush that happens after eating a candy bar at home, or it's not just being fidgety when sitting in the car for a long time. It's more than that. Symptoms need to onset in early childhood, so before 12 years old. With clients that I treat and have treated, I've seen those symptoms onset as young as 3 years old. And for ADHD to be at the clinical level, symptoms need to cause distress to daily life, cause dysfunction to daily life, and deviate from what is considered normal behaviors. So I'm going to talk more about the clinical symptoms. There are 3 different types of ADHD. The first one is the predominantly inattentive type. The second one is the predominantly hyperactive type, which I'll explain in the slides to come. And then there is the combined type, where there are the inattentive symptoms and the hyperactive symptoms. So the inattentive symptoms are more than just not being able to pay attention, because we all have moments from time to time where we aren't able to pay attention. So the DSM-5 criteria for inattention are as follows, and for it to be at the clinical level, at least 5 of these symptoms need to be present. So the first one is making careless mistakes and missing close details. Inattention to tasks, so this would be preferred and non-preferred tasks. lack of follow through on tasks. So once the task has been started, the task is not completed, and this is common for more than one task. Difficulty organizing tasks and activities. So for kids, this would be having difficulty with keeping an assignment notebook with due dates and keeping track of when they need to have things completed by, how far in advance they should start the assignment to get it in by that due date. Avoids, dislikes, or reluctance to mentally sustaining tasks. Loses things necessary for tasks or activities. Forgetful and easily distracted. So again, at least 5 of these symptoms need to be present for at least 6 months across all settings to be at the clinical level for a diagnosis of ADHD. Next, I'm going to talk about the hyperactive symptoms. So this is more than just a sugar rush or being fidgety, because again, we all have moments where we get a sugar rush after eating something sweet, but then eventually the sugar wears off and we return to our baseline, or we all have moments where we're fidgety. So what are those hyperactive symptoms to be at the clinical level? According to the DSM-5, these are the criteria. So like the inattentive symptoms, at least 5 of these need to be present for it to be considered at the clinical level. Fidgets, squirms, taps hands and feet, talks excessively, leaves seats in situations that require seating. So for school-age children, this would be getting up to leave the classroom during structured time or getting up from the auditorium when there's a presentation. Interrupting, this would look like interrupting mom and dad when they're on the phone, or interrupting the teacher when they're in the middle of talking or in the middle of a conversation with another student or teacher. Runs or climbs where inappropriate. So when you're out at the store, it would be inappropriate to climb on the shelves. Difficulty waiting or turn taking. In children, an example of this would be playing a board game where waiting for every player to take their turn until it is their turn again is difficult. So this would look like wanting to take everybody's turn for them just to rush through it and get back to it being their turn. Inability to quietly play or engage in leisurely activities. So it's common to hear kids who have ADHD humming while they're completing a task, and they may not even be aware that they're humming. Intrusive, so this would be intruding on others' personal space. And their energy levels are so high that it's almost if they were driven by a motor. So again, for ADHD to be at the clinical level, at least 5 of these symptoms need to be present for at least 6 months or longer across all settings. Now I'm going to share some case examples of clients that I am currently working with or I have worked with who all have an ADHD diagnosis. ADHD presents differently in everybody. And for the purpose of maintaining client confidentiality, I've disguised their identities as cartoon characters. So my first case is Stitch. For Stitch, the world of electronics is much more exciting than sleep. So Stitch will stay up all night on electronics. When mom comes in the room to check on Stitch, Stitch will hide under his blankets and stay on his iPad. And then when mom leaves the room, he can come out from under his blanket, or Stitch might go on his computer that's in his room. So from being up all night on electronics and not getting sleep, Stitch is sleep deprived for the next morning at school, and those show up as behaviors. So this is what that morning school behavior looks like for Stitch. He's falling asleep in class. He's not able to retain the information from the teacher. And Stitch has his own agenda for what he wants to accomplish for the day, which is usually different from the teacher's agenda. So Stitch will not follow teacher directives, and he does what he wants. And he uses electronics without permission, so hiding his iPad in his desk, not putting it away after the teacher prompts him to put it away. And these behaviors become a cycle throughout the morning in all of his classes with all of his teachers. So by late morning, early afternoon, Stitch rages when he's told to put his electronics away and to follow teacher directives and do the work as they're instructing him to do. So Stitch will rage. This rage looks like yelling, crying, kicking, throwing himself on the floor. At one point, it got to the extent of stabbing the teacher with a pencil, and this rage can last anywhere from a few minutes up to 2 hours. For Stitch, the longest the rage lasted was 2 hours. And after that period of rage is over, is followed by immense feelings of guilt. So being overly apologetic and saying sorry and that I won't do it again. And this cycle of rage followed by guilt is very common in children who have ADHD. My second case example is Donald Duck. So I'm going to start by talking about Donald Duck's school behavior. His backpack and desk are disorganized. He loses materials. He turns in assignments late if he turns them in at all. Some things that I would do with Donald Duck were color coding his folders and notebooks for each class, having picture cards of what his desk looks like when it's organized and putting that picture on his desk and referring back to that picture when his desk would become messy. And Donald Duck had a lot of escape behaviors in class. So going back to those symptoms for an ADHD diagnosis of not being able to stay in your seat when seating is required, these escape behaviors were getting up to sharpen his pencil multiple times in one class, asking for permission to go to the bathroom or go to the nurse's office. And when those requests were denied by the teacher, Donald Duck would roll around on the floor, run around the classroom, or climb up on his desk. So again, another symptom of climbing where it's inappropriate. Climbing on the desk is one of them. And also hitting his peers. When Donald Duck perceived something to be unfair, he would rage, hit his peers, and when that rage was over, he would feel overly guilty, apologize, say he would never do it again, and then the cycle would repeat itself, just like we saw in Stitch with that rage followed by feelings of guilt, common in ADHD. At home, Donald Duck had similar behaviors, so hitting his siblings, his parents, and his pets, throwing objects across the room when told no. This was whenever Donald Duck was presented with a non-preferred task, so that was usually a chore, homework, or being told to get off of electronics. In the community, Donald Duck had impulsive spending. So one of the things we worked on was delayed gratification and not instant gratification. We went into the dollar store and he wanted to buy everything that he saw, immediately throw it in the cart, and not take a look at everything before making a decision on what he wanted to buy, and not thinking ahead to, I'm going to other stores later in the day. What is there that I might want to buy? And I can budget my money for all of the stores. So he spent all of his money on one store. He bought all of this stuff. And then once he got home, he didn't want any of it. It just stayed in the bag or laying around the house. Other behaviors he had in the community, climbing on the shelves and hiding. So again, going back to that symptom of climbing where it's inappropriate, we see it across multiple settings here. We see it at school, we see it in the community, and we would also see it at home with climbing up on the kitchen island or climbing up on furniture. He would ask mom to buy him something multiple times, and when mom said no, he would throw himself on the ground. So that resulted in leaving the store and not getting what he was asking mom for. And the last case that I'm sharing is an adult client who is college aged. This is Daffy Duck. Daffy Duck has all or nothing or black and white thinking. So there are no gray areas. This is common in ADHD. So when it comes to Daffy Duck's schedule, Daffy Duck likes structure, but feels burnout by routine. So, for example, Daffy Duck likes being able to go work out in the morning and have that structure to look forward to that morning workout. But for the rest of the day, when it comes to going to classes is scheduled and allowing enough time to do homework, Daffy Duck feels burnt out by that routine. So that leads into the nothing thinking, where Daffy Duck just stops going to class or doesn't do any homework. That all or nothing or black and white thinking also applies to Daffy Duck spending. Daffy Duck had a summer job and would either hoard all of the money or would impulsively spend. And Daffy Duck was getting packages at the house every day to the point that they were piling up and there were so many of them to go through. So that impulsive spending resulted in lack of motivation to go through the purchases. So it's that instant gratification of ordering a package. It comes to the house, but now that tedious task of having to open every package, try everything on, and sort out what I am keeping, what I'm getting rid of, and for the things I'm getting rid of, because there was so much of it ordered, having to see when everything needs to be returned back by to get full credit. So this would burn out Daffy Duck, and Daffy Duck would delay returning everything and trying everything on until the date that it was due back at the store or back to UPS to be shipped back. And this goes into the sleeping and also with the impulsive spending. The desire to shop was stronger than the desire to sleep. So Daffy Duck would get racing thoughts to shop online, thinking there's something I really want. I have to have it. I have to order it online now. And that cycle would continue of wanting to buy more things. And then Daffy Duck was sleep deprived. And by coworkers, Daffy Duck was perceived as ditzy or irresponsible. So, treatment approaches for ADHD. So, the first lines of treatment, because ADHD is not a quick fix, it's not just take medication and then the symptoms are gone. It's a neurodevelopmental condition, so it does take consistency and dedication to treatment. First lines of treatment are behavioral therapy. So those behavioral interventions, like I used with Donald Duck of picture cards and color coding, that would be one example of a behavioral intervention. That also falls into executive functioning skills training. And also cognitive behavioral therapy is another first line of treatment to challenge the thoughts that are no longer serving you and to come up with new thoughts that will better serve you and result in different outcomes. So for clients like Daffy Duck with that all or nothing thinking and think they have to spend all of their money at once and to give in whenever it is that they want something. And then the second line of treatment is medication. So usually these medications are stimulants like Vyvanse or Adderall. And frequent and higher doses do not equal instant symptom reduction. So if a client thinks, well, I have an exam today and I need to be extra focused, so I'm going to take an extra medication, take 2 doses, it does not work that way. It's very common for clients to start on the lowest dose of a medication to see how they respond to it. And if they respond well, then with time, the dose can increase. For scheduling and additional information about me and working with me, here's my contact information and how you can get a hold of me.
All right. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and kind of take over here. So like I mentioned, I've been really excited to have this conversation in general, because as I had alluded to at the beginning, this concept of ADHD and what it is it's a very prevalent, and it's just a conversation that a lot of people are having. It's one of those hot topic conversation pieces. And it's one of those things that we've gotten to the point in our culture and our society that I think a lot of people know something, or they know something about, or they've heard something about ADHD. So everybody knows something. And whether it's true or whether it's misinformation, these things are being spread around, whether it's online and social media or in-person conversations, whether people really truly know what it is or not. And so that's why I was really excited to start with Alexandra's portion of the presentation, because she's really helping us to just lay down what is ADHD, what isn't ADHD, and what does that actually mean for perhaps my child. And so I want to kind of continue that conversation, but kind of taking a little bit more in depth here to ADHD and how that is then related to sleep-related breathing disorders, and how that relates to what we're doing at MyoWay Centers for Kids. Because again, we're a myofunctional therapy center focused on healthy jaw and airway development. So when we talk about being involved with ADHD, a lot of people kind of scratch their heads and wonder, how is that even related? And so I want to lay down a little bit of a framework and some groundwork before we get into the actual connection, but I promise there is a through line. So just bear with me as we get a little bit of understanding here. I want to begin by simply expressing what are sleep-related breathing disorders. And they simply are a group of conditions that are characterized by abnormal breathing patterns during sleep. So a couple of the most common examples of SRBDs are, yes, chronic snoring. So if you snore regularly at night, technically that is a sleep-related breathing disorder. What is probably the most well-known of the SRBDs in society and culture and conversation right now is obstructive sleep apnea, or just sleep apnea for short. You know, with the huge rise of CPAP machines and people needing those to assist them with getting air and oxygen at night. This is something that has become a lot more prevalent in the conversation today within healthcare and even outside of those spheres. But obstructive sleep apnea is at its core when the airway becomes blocked during sleep, and it causes pauses in the breathing, which is why you get that characteristic kind of pause in breathing, and then suddenly they wake themselves up with a great gasp because they haven't been breathing for a short period of time. There's also central sleep apnea, which is very similar. It's just the cause is a little bit different. In this case, the brain is the culprit. The brain is not sending the proper signals for breathing during sleep. And then there's sleep-related hypoventilation. Hypoventilation is simply when the breathing is too shallow. So it's at night while they're sleeping, they're breathing too shallowly and not getting enough oxygen into their bodies to function optimally. And so for the case of what we're talking about today, the most important piece to keep in mind is with all of these sleep-related breathing disorders, most, if not all of them, are typically leading to some form of chronic open mouth posture or mouth breathing. And so again, if you're not familiar with this whole concept, you might be wondering, well, what's the trouble with mouth breathing? Why is that important? Why does that matter? Well, to begin, let me just give you a brief little explanation of the fact that humans as a species, and really almost all of the animal kingdom, are obligate nasal breathers, which means to function at our highest capacity, we need to be breathing through our noses. The reason for that is manyfold, but some of the most common reasons for that is when we breathe through our nose, it acts as a natural filter, especially in our modern day and age where there's a lot more toxins and allergens and all sorts of particles and things in our air that we're breathing and taking in. Our nose acts as a natural filter to filter some of those things out so they don't reach the internal systems of our body. In a similar way, our nose actually warms the air that's going in, so it makes it more palatable for our lungs and our internal structures as well. When we nasal breathe, we also naturally build up nitric oxide, which is just a gas that our body produces to help our blood better absorb and utilize the oxygen that we're taking in when we're breathing. So on the flip side, if we're breathing through our mouth, not only are we bypassing all of those positive effects, but we're also, again, taking in copious amounts of air that can often lead to, indigestion and issues with the digestive process, a lot of gas and bloating. Again, we're bringing that air directly in without any kind of filtration system directly into our lungs and our internal systems. So those toxins, those particles, those chemicals, all the stuff in our air has more direct access to our internal systems, as well as passing directly over the tonsils and the adenoids, which anybody who is a parent or deals with kids, that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. That's why we're seeing kids with enlarged tonsils and adenoids and needing tonsillectomies and adenoidectomies, because they're getting a lot of external stimulation from these things in the air that normally we wouldn't have if we're filtering that with our nasal breathing. In terms, again, though, of the conversation we want to have at large today about ADHD, the trouble with mouth breathing, though, really comes down to the fact that mouth breathing activates and overstimulates, when it's done in a chronic fashion, the sympathetic nervous system, which is our body's fight or flight response. So we all know what this feels like when we're in fight or flight, whether we're in an actual danger situation or a perceived danger situation. We know what it feels when that adrenaline starts pumping, our pulse quickens, our mouths get a little bit dry, and maybe we get some of that tunnel vision. It's harder to make informed decisions. Those decisions have to be snap decisions because it's all about surviving to the next moment. And again, whether that's a perceived danger, when you have to make a large presentation and maybe your job is on the line, or a good promotion is on the line, or an actual dangerous situation when you're camping and, oh no, there's a bear chasing me all of a sudden. We know what those things feel like. And we feel them because they are actual physical, biological things happening in our body. Our body is shifting the internal systems a little bit. It's maybe turning off, or at the very least pushing to the back burner some of those systems that aren't as necessary to survive in that moment. If the bear is chasing you, it's not as important for your body to focus on digesting what you had for breakfast that morning. Instead, we need all that blood to be pumping down to the big thigh muscles that we have so that we can run fast enough to escape the bear. Also, this is not the accurate way to escape a bear, so please don't try and go running away from bears. I don't claim to know the proper ways to do that, so just a disclaimer there. But all that to say, we know what those things feel like. Our body is actually making changes when our sympathetic nervous system is stimulated and that fight or flight response kicks in. It's not functioning at the normal rate that it would if, in fact, we are breathing through our nose. This persistent state of arousal when we're mouth breathing constantly is known as sympathetic overdrive. And it is, as you can probably imagine then, the exact opposite of the rest and digest state, which is promoted by proper nasal breathing. When we're keeping our lips closed and breathing through our nose, that signals to our body that we are in a state of peace. We're in a place that we are safe, we can be calm, we can be rested, we can be relaxed. And when we're sleeping at night and we're keeping our lips closed and breathing through our nose, this is what is telling our body that it's an okay time to rejuvenate and recover from all the things that we've put it through in any given day. If we've been injured or are recovering from a surgery, that's when our body knits itself back together and heals. This is also when, particularly at young ages with kids, our body is growing and our brain is developing further. So when we're in a constant state of mouth breathing, particularly at night, all of these functions that our body needs to do in order to grow and function properly are at the very least being impacted and pushed off to the back burner, if not kind of shut down altogether, because we're in this constant state of fight or flight. I have to just survive. So what we're finding then is that when we're in that constant state of fight or flight, it's actually inhibiting a child's brain development. An overactive sympathetic nervous system, or being in that constant state of sympathetic overdrive, which can and is caused by chronic mouth breathing, we find that that's disrupting the healthy development and function, particularly of the prefrontal cortex in the brain, which ends up leading to a decline in higher order cognitive abilities. And so what does that look like? Well, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for a load of different things, such as complex decision-making, long-term planning, or even short-term planning, just planning in general, problem solving, different things that have to do with attention, impulse control, being able to regulate one's emotions, and social behavior, understanding social cues, and knowing how to interact with other people. All of these things are cognitive abilities that are overseen by our prefrontal cortex. So if our children at night are sleeping with their mouths open habitually, if they're living their day-to-day lives as mouth breathers with that open habitually, that's signaling to their brain that their sympathetic nervous system needs to be kicked in because they're in fight or flight mode. When they're in fight or flight mode, their prefrontal cortex is not getting the attention it needs to be able to develop properly. And all of these prefrontal cortex abilities that we were just talking about, they're not being able to develop properly either, which then brings us full circle into why this relates to ADHD at all. When those prefrontal cortex abilities are not being developed properly, we're seeing symptoms that basically mimic ADHD. Children act hyperactively. They have a lot of inattention, a lot of impulsivity, irritability and mood swings and disorganization. Basically all of those things that Alexandra was sharing with us in her different case studies. So the question then becomes, well, does my child have ADHD, or are they just chronically tired? Are they just chronically exhausted? And more science is showing us that when a child's airway is narrow, or when their orofacial muscles are dysfunctional in some way, the brain is not getting enough oxygen at night while they're sleeping. That disruption in their sleep cycle is then leading to things like poor focus, hyperactivity, and mood issues. One really great peer-reviewed study in pediatrics, all the way back from 1998 was when this research was done. So we've known about this for quite some time. It was originally published in 2001. But this study found that children with sleep-disordered breathing, they were 60% more likely to develop behavioral issues like inattention and aggression. So again, we're hearing poor focus, hyperactivity, mood issues, inattention, aggression, all of these things that are also symptoms of ADHD. So then if the question becomes, well, if these symptoms are manifesting in my child, how do I know what's going on? How do I find what the best solution for my child is? So if your child or a child that you know and love and care about is exhibiting ADHD-like symptoms, one of the best things you can start with is just considering these implications. Knowing that it's not best or right to jump to the conclusion, because as Alexandra was sharing, there's a lot of prerequisites for an ADHD diagnosis. It's not just because your child's fidgety. It's not just because they're hyperactive for some reason for a short period of time. There's a lot of things that have to be in place for that diagnosis to actually have meaning and stick for them. But also, as we now know, there might be other things at play, such as a sleep-related breathing disorder or an airway dysfunction. So I would definitely suggest getting an airway evaluation, whether that's coming into a place like MyoWay Centers for Kids, where we offer free consultations and are happy to answer those questions and work with you to find out if an airway dysfunction is something that your child might be dealing with, or an airway-focused dentist or orthodontist, an ENT, or even someone like Alexandra, who is a professional in the field of counseling and psychology and those kinds of things, but also has the knowledge of the airway side of things. All of these are great places to start, but get that airway evaluation. See if that's something that might be inhibiting your child's development. And if it's found that that is the case, work with an airway focused specialist to get to the root of the issue. Find out if it's, tongue posture, or if it's a sleep related breathing disorder, or whatever it might be, whether there's sleep, mouth breathing versus nasal breathing, whatever the issue seems to be, we can work together to find the root cause, find a solution that addresses that, and then can start to help weed out those symptoms that are showing up. As opposed to just jumping into an ADHD diagnosis. And at the end of the day, we definitely don't want you to walk away here thinking that, at MyoWay Centers for Kids and other airway-focused places that ADHD doesn't exist. That's not the case at all. We don't believe that. That's why we wanted to have someone like Alexandra open this conversation to help us know exactly what ADHD is, and again, what it's not. Because we want the kids that truly do fit into those diagnoses to get the help that they need in the way that they need it. But then there are a whole slew of other children who don't fall into that category, but are still suffering and need some additional help. And maybe getting an airway evaluation and treating that muscle dysfunction in the orofacial realm is something that can help. So we definitely welcome, again, come in, give us a call, check out our website at myowaycenters.com. You can book a free consultation directly from the website. We'd love to have you come in, answer your questions, talk about your concerns, and see if there's a way that we can partner and help you so that your child can thrive and live their best life possible. Again, thank you so much for coming today, for listening in, or again, if you're watching the recording of this, taking the time to learn a little bit more about what we think is a really, really important conversation. Thank you so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day.